criticized for not being in it, but they were a neutral. We were a neutral country. We weren't aggressive at all. And Japan bombed Pearl Harbor and put our navy at the bottom of the ocean. I think you might want to research this. I think we had some counting women, nurses, Army, Navy, Marines, Coast Guard. There's almost 15 million people involved, and I don't think America had 100 million people at that time. I'm not sure, though. But, I often want to look it up, but I didn't. So that was a great percentage of people that were involved. And then we took a long time building up. We didn't have tanks, we didn't have guns when the first groups went in. We just weren't prepared for war.
Did you think we were going to go to war when you joined the reserves?
Well, I joined it at the one when they bombed Pearl Harbor.
Oh, okay. So that's when the patriotic feeling came into play.
Although my dad wanted me to join the head of Naval Reserve when I was in high school, and I just didn't like. I couldn't stand being out on the water. I'd get seasick looking at the boat, and I said I didn't want to get involved. And as soon as war broke out, they went into active duty there. Mine went in after I got out of school. But and when I went overseas, I was sick all the way over.
Really?
But the Navy guys on the ship told me, "Oh, this is the worst storm we've ever been in." And but as soon as we went into the Mediterranean Sea, it was like you were on a lake, and we didn't have all the turbulence.
What kind of carrier were you on?
Well, I was on was really a luxury liner, troop ship. Had about, I think we went over about 500 chaplains on it, the replacements, and I'd say about 12,000 troops on the ship.
So when you joined, did you have a job before you joined?
No,
or were you just finishing up high school? Or
I finished up junior college there.
Junior college.
Yeah.
Okay, so you that was pretty much your first job then, joining the reserve.
Yeah, I came out with no. I had jobs, as you go through high school.
Small things, right.
Part-time.
Right.
How much would they pay you when you were on duty?
Well, when we were active duty, about $28 a month. And then you paid for your own laundry, which took $10 out. But the wages of it was $1.25 an hour then. So everything was kind of relative. People that were getting $50 a week on jobs, that's what their rent was for a month. So it was kind of balanced.
Balanced out at the end.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Sorry. Yeah, where did you train like that?
Well, I trained in Fort McClellan, Alabama, Anniston, Alabama, where I first went for basic training, and then I stayed on the cadre. I was become a corporal, and I trained troops, doing the same basic training, probably 4 or 5 different 8-week courses, which was the hardest part of any training, because you had to do a lot of 25-mile walks with a 90-pound pack on your back.
Really?
So it was tough.
Tough.
Yeah, really tough.
What exactly did you do in training? Like, other than, I know you just described that, but what other procedures did you go through?
Did you train for a certain position too?
Yeah, big part. Yeah. You had to do everything with weapons. I never, as a kid, I might have had a cap gun, but the cap gun was one cap and you pop it. Well, before, then I went from Alabama, I went into Fort Benning to take officer training. And there you put a gun back together, clean it, put it back together blindfolded.
Wow.
that's something when you never handled a gun in your life.
Yeah, I bet.
And to get that,
Did it take long to master that, or
it took a while.
did it?
We went in with 210 candidates for officer school and 105 graduated, so about a 50% type of thing. But,
What exactly was your specific occupation in the armed forces? You said you were on that carrier. Now, what exactly?
well,
did
no,
you do on
that
that
was
carrier?
only a troop ship. But I was a platoon, had a platoon of soldiers, which would be A, B, C, and D company, and it would be probably 300 to 400 soldiers.
Okay.
So what would your rank be with all this?
Second lieutenant.
Second lieutenant. Did you see any specific combat?
No, because when we got there, we were just a regiment. We were shipped over. We were replacement groups, and the group I was with was they were a signal company, had to do with Signal Corps, and they really weren't infantry soldiers, but they got retrained into the infantry, and we were attached to the 91st Infantry Division, which was the only all black division in the Army. And so they sent us back down to take care of German prisoners. That's what I had to move them around Italy. And that was my main job.
How did that exactly work? I mean, you took care of them. What did you do with the prisoners? Like, you want to tell us some of the stuff, like how you took care of them? And
America always adhered to the Geneva Convention. They had a lot of, you see it a lot now where they tell us we're not doing the right thing, but America always did the right thing. Might be an individual might cause some problem,
okay.
but as a policy,
The policy was there. And it was,
the Iraq prisoners are being treated. They get 2 meals a day. That's what's required. Sometimes our guys were able to get 3 meals a day. So, but that's wasn't being one of the harshest treated people. Was the Japanese. They treated the prisoners, a lot of British prisoners, women and men, very bad. And the Bataan March that they had in the Philippines, which was mostly American, they didn't feed them, they just beat them to death. However, some did survive, which is a miracle in itself. But we were always criticized, and still being criticized. But I don't. You have to be aware of it. You don't hold it as you don't think about it every day. But
How many prisoners did you oversee?
well, we probably had about 6,000 to 8,000 prisoners. I moved 1,000 prisoners when the war started winding down by freight train to Pizza up to the Swiss border. And why we took them by train, a boxcar, because while Italy was a partner with Germany in the war, it wasn't a partner that they enjoyed. The Italian people weren't too fond of it. So you couldn't take them in shipment trucks. If you ever been to Italy, the streets are all narrow. Not all now, they're super highway. But if you drove a prisoner of war truck through with it open, they throw things down into the truck, as they went through the streets from their home. So we took them by train.
Where exactly were you stationed?
In Italy, I was stationed we landed in Naples, and we went up to Genoa, which they call Leghorn. And we were in the Leaning Tower of Pisa, Verona, Italy, which was across the Po River. And spent some time in Rome. But Rome was not touched by the war. They didn't bomb it. But
Were there like any close calls between, people that took care of the prisoners of war and the actual prisoners? Did they ever try escaping, or did any of that happen, or was most of it mainly under control?
yeah, most of that was under control. They're fenced in, and our non-commissioned officers, corporal sergeants, would work them, around. And we had an interpreter who came from Colombia, South America. He was a diplomat in the German embassy, and Colombia turned him over to the Americans, and he interpreted what they might have some problems with the prisoners, and he would tell me what somebody might think they were being mistreated, and we would happily iron it out, straighten it out.
What was a typical day like for you?
Well, did a lot of marching, a lot of back and forth in jeeps. Also, when we got overseas, we did a little less walking overseas than we did in the States. In the States, we were always walking. The infantry was always on. But a little bit of desk work that came in with it. He'd come in every morning, the interpreter would complain. We'd listen to him. He'd give me the Hitler salute, but I never returned it. That's not necessary to return. So he wanted to let me know that he was still a German interested. I disregarded it.
Yes.
Good for him, but we got even with him in a later time down the road. But it wasn't anything physical. He came in to me one day. We were being shipped back through the States to go to Japan. And he come in, and we had the Nazi American troops, which were the Japanese American. They were with the 10th Mountain Division. They were going to relieve us and guard them. So he gave me a question. He said, "Are you not at war with Japan?" I said, "Oh, yeah." I said, "The Germans and the Japanese people are our enemies." I said, "Oh, we're definitely at war. How come you're leaving and the Japanese are going to guard us?" I said, "Well, it's really to straighten you out." That's what I got back at him. Saluting Heil Hitler. I left him that way. But, yeah, when we moved 1,000 troops, we included so many garbage cans for each, for their johns, latrines, and we never let them out because the Germans mostly were fair-skinned, light hair. When they were in southern Italy, most of the Italians were dark-haired. But as you got up to northern Italy, the hair and their complexions kind of changed because some French and some Swiss people moved into the population and intermingled, and that's how you get different. So they could break away up there and get into the population, but they didn't try to run away down southern Italy.
There's nowhere to go.
Anytime.
Before you enlisted, you said you were excited and it was patriotic to go for the U.S. to war, but then your wife enlisted to follow you. How did you feel about that?
Very, very perplexed. How the story was, the women were asked to join both every Marines, WACs, which were Army, and WAVES, which were Navy, and also even the Coast Guard had women. They were asked to join to relieve a man to go to active duty. That didn't always work that way, but it was a good selling job, but they were needed. So they did work. When she went through college, she took. That's where we met. We didn't meet in the service. We met at Delhi in college. And she took home economics. She could be a cook or a baker or whatever. And when she went into service, they put her in the library, which is par for the course in the Army. You know,
Right.
don't necessarily get into whatever you're trained for. But trained for.
Was she, I'm sorry, was she over in Europe with you?
No, she was in. She went to Hunter College in New York City for a basic course, and then she went to Texas, Corpus Christi, Texas, and that's where we were married, in Corpus Christi, Texas. After I graduated from Fort Benning, Georgia, law school.
I'm sorry, you're going to say something else?
But she stayed in. I mean, that didn't change. She in Texas. I think possible if I went to the Pacific, she could have got a transfer. Some waves were in Pearl Harbor, to Hawaii.
Right.
But, so she didn't serve overseas. She served a year and a half. But both her brother, who did get killed in the service, I sent a picture of him. He went to Bonaventure College, and he really was not accepted for the Army because he had lost a thumb in an oil well accident. However, Bonaventure had an ROTC program, which had something to do with artillery and tanks. So he was accepted as a tank, and he was killed on going over the Rhine River in Germany. And it turned out his mother and father got a telegram about our wedding on the 8th of December, and they got a telegram on the 10th of December that he was killed. He was killed 2 days after. Kind of sad, but that kept me going to try to make up for it.
When you were, over in Italy, did you make any close relationships with anyone? Did you get to know anyone? Did you make some good buddies?
Surprisingly, I did. I had one Italian American that was of Italian descent that he graduated from Fordham University in New York City, and he was there probably a year ahead of me, so he kind of took me under his wing. He was a captain, and he would take me, and he would work behind the lines with the Italian patriots, which not too many. That's what they were hoping here for Iraq, but I think you can discount that because everyone turned around where they look like they're for Hussein, no matter what. But there were Italians. They had a partisan army in Italy, and he would infiltrate there and come back out knowing what they were going to do and where they were going to be, so they didn't fire on them at all. And that same group was the one that captured Mussolini and hung him upside down northern Italy. So that was one of the few dictators that taken care of. Well, Hitler killed himself, but he got killed by the partisan Italians. That was another plus for the Italian population.
How long were you in Europe for?
I was there 10 months.
10 months.
It was all it.
Did you get to, kind of learn and develop some of the Italian culture, or see any of it, or did you even see any of it?
I had a 10-day leave. I spent it in Rome, which you could probably spend a month in Rome. We wanted to see everything. We went to the catacombs where the Christians were put to death or hid from the ones they wanted to put them to death. The Colosseum. We went to the Colosseum where they used to put the Christians in with the lions years ago. And they were great for opera. And this captain went with a girl that was an opera singer, so he took me to opera, so we learned it through osmosis, the opera. And it was interesting because they had outdoor operas in Rome where they would call for a team of horses to come up on the stage. A team of horses come up on the stage. It was no different in our operas. We're all in clothes.
Right.
But it was educational. I enjoyed. We didn't do too much mixing with the popular. We had enough to do to take care of the prisoners, not get too involved. They were, as the Germans were pushed back, you would see the old folks go out into the hills, and you'd see an Italian woman with a head roll and a dining room table on her head, walking back to her house.
Really?
And the husband going along with a stick, switching dandelions. We used to say, how about helping her? Neat day, we know, he said.
Why did he say that?
Wasn't his job.
Just wasn't his job, really? You were talking about that captain you became pretty good friends with. What terms were you guys on?
We didn't have to salute each other. He was the captain. I should salute him.
Right.
Anybody above me. But never good terms. I even forgot his name.
Really? Do you know him up until this day, or have you seen him since?
No, never. The same way with our troops. You see, we went in our troops. A lot of like New York State had a group like the National Guard was shipped out all together. Some came from Blackhawk, wherever they came from, they all knew each other. But when you go in as a replacement, and the whole regiment was replacements, some of those replacements came from West Virginia, Georgia,
Different places.
and Kansas, Pennsylvania, maybe a couple from New York, not too many. So you never had commercials. You wouldn't have any. The reunions are not like where they leave together and come back together. Then they stay and have reunions almost on a yearly basis.
Have you been to a reunion with your comrades?
No. I belong to VFW in Williamsville, and of course none of them was with me, but that's where we. Yet they talk about the war very little.
Really?
Yeah, very little.
Why do you think is that?
Well, I think they figured if it would get written up, people would be in it, a part of our history in this country. If you read that and follow it, would probably be enough said. Because individuals, some had more problems, some got wounded 3 times, some got wounded not at all. So it was a
Different story for every person.
Yeah.
Right.
Did you ever run out of supplies or food for the prisoners?
No, we're always well supplied. On some of the might be, our rations might get down, but not too much. The sea rations out of a can. But, and then they developed some more. Today the rations are a lot better, a lot more.
Right. Quicker.
More to them too.
Right. Was there ever a doubt in your mind that the U.S. would fall to the Germans?
No,
You never doubted it?
never done.
You always had the confidence and patriotism and belief in your country?
Yeah, because we we were criticized for bombing, you know. You see some of these talk shows today, some of these experts, they're on Fox and CNN, you know, but they know all about it. But I think they only know what they read in the book. But they criticized it because we bombed a city in Germany. Was making all the ammunition for their effort. Well, there was a lady from Orchard Park wrote to the editor not too long ago, maybe 6 months ago, saying you shouldn't criticize them because she was born and brought up in London, and Germans bombed London on a daily basis.
Yeah.
But nobody criticized that.
Right.
But they criticized.
Before he does, somebody should ask, like, you know, about warfare today.
Yeah.
As opposed to like.
Go ahead.
You were saying that you were real, you know, you believed in the country and you never had a doubt you guys would beat the Germans. You still think that feeling is carried today, even now as we're at war with Iraq? I mean, that feeling do you think that feeling developed in World War II, or like the confidence knowing that the Americans will prevail and win? I mean,
I think it came out of World War I, you know, because they had such a they were fighting disease, and they fought in in trenches.
Mustard gas.
And mustard gas was used, you know, where you go through World War II and Vietnam and Korea. Not too much gas, or plenty of firepower used, you know. So, and I think that some of that passed on to our generation.
right.
And then, of course, when you've seen your Navy down the bottom of the ocean, then you realize that somebody could take, you know, the Germans had a lot of submarines. There was even rumors, and I'm sure factual, where they even landed off our Atlantic coast, our Pacific coast, and did some spying, but never caught any of them. But,
Really?
you know, so they did have submarines. And when our troop ships went over, we lost a lot where the submarines got them too. We had to zigzag all the way across the ocean because of the submarine. But yeah, I feel like that's it built in.
Right.
Vietnam was a little different. I don't know if it was something they didn't want, or was at the wrong time. You know, the French were at Vietnam for 25 years. They pulled out. We went in, and believe it or not, we were there 10 years. And it ended up drawing a line in the sand. They still kept South Vietnam and North Vietnam. Did the same thing in Korea. Well, that's not really total victory. And that's why Desert Storm, they're saying now, and you gotta really believe them, Desert Storm, the first one, went all the way across, but they didn't go after. They just cleared out Kuwait and left Iraq a little bit alone.
Right.
And didn't really go after the Hussein. And now the people there don't know, are we going after them or not? Aren't we? You know,
Right.
So they're caught.
Left.
They're caught in between.
You're not.
Yeah.
What did you say again that your occupation was after the war? You said you went back to UB.
I took nights, and then I worked at Hens and Kelly's merchandising.
Merchant.
And ended up, I was a furniture buyer for them, and I also merchandised everything that went into the home. You know, not clothes, but furniture, housewares. That was my job.
Did you do that all the way up until your retirement?
Yeah.
Were you rewarded at all with any medals in World War II?
Had good behavior medal, which we all like to get. Sometimes we weren't always in good behavior. But the medal wouldn't be if you committed a felony or anything,
Mhm.
committed stealing or something like that, or did some damage to your own equipment, which would be stupid.
Yeah.
And then the Mediterranean, European medal for serving in the Mediterranean.
What did they give you when you went over to Europe? Like, what supplies did you have? Personal items and things like that.
Yeah, you have a full pack. You have a duffel bag that you kept most of your belongings in, which was your everything you would wear: socks, underwear, which was all olive drab.
Mhm.
A lot of times after you came home from the war, you still used them because there wasn't anything available. The country was on rations, sugar rations, gasoline rations, and women couldn't buy sheets and pillowcases because that wasn't available. So it took about a year after the war to get stuff back producing for civilians.
Right. The regular amounts of rations of whatever it was back in the U.S.
And then I trained with an M1 rifle, which was an automatic rifle. They're still using it today. And they used to have Springfield rifles. But as an officer, you carried a carbine, which is a smaller gun, which was all right because our weapons were mortars. We dealt with the 60 and the 81 millimeter mortars, which were just behind the lines and shot at targets like machine gun nests of the enemy. But we had to go back to training, which, America's, like I say, I think that should be figured out what percentage of the 15 million people that served was of the population, because even those people that are at home, the women went into the war factories. That's where Rosie the Riveter came from. They made the tanks and the guns, and because of so many soldiers over.
Right.
Up here in Niagara Falls, Wright Aviation, they built a lot of airplanes. Some men, but a lot of women. And so that's another part. And then they had air raid wardens in America where they would go, especially along the coast. I wasn't living here then, but along where I lived along the Long Island Sound and the Atlantic Ocean. And they go up and down the streets with a flashlight, making sure your lights were out in your home, or so it couldn't be seen on the streets, so in case they came over. And so most cities were dark, and most of the villages were dark during the war. But in fact, when I was at camp, I went to Camp Upton, which is at the end of Long Island. I enlisted in Albany when I was at Delhi. The four of us went to Albany to enlist, and from college. And it was about a 3-hour drive, and we slept in the car overnight so we could enlist, and then came back to school the next day. And when I was at Camp Upton, the guy that did Superman was working for me as a cleaner of latrines. He was from Detroit, and so I spent a lot of time just chatting with him while he was, and in the end, they end up working for the news service in the Army. He wasn't, he did pictures and things. But I got two stories. We went by troop train from Long Island to Alabama, which is about probably a 2.5-day trip. And on one of the cars, practically all the cars had potbelly stoves. They heated with wood or coal to keep the train passengers warm. Of course, this was the middle of May, so we pull into a college town, Bowling Green. university's there now, but at Bowling Green, Kentucky, about 7 or 8 little kids came up and collected from the troops for ice cream. They put the hand, everybody give them $1, and they're going to go get ice cream. They never came back.
Really?
But they were kids.
Yeah.
They had pretty good. Every troop train that started up there, they made a collection.
Jeez.
But another thing that we have to be discrimination. Well, I was from New York, outside New York City, and I thought it was up on a lot of things. One of the big things that surprised me, made me take a step back. When I got into Alabama, they had latrine, men's room, colored only, white only, and that was in 1943. Add that up, this is 60 years ago.
Yeah.
That's hard to believe.
Yeah.
And that's why Martin Luther King and all of them, and they served, but it was still hard to believe.
Yeah. Were there any arguments between whites and blacks and
No, you'd get a little. Some of the guys would that get off the train would purposely go in and they'd into the colored one.
Really?
Colored one just to see. There was always somebody there to kick them out. So there was a little bit of
going in there maybe to start something or just to see?
Try to prove a point because that wasn't true in New York.
Oh, okay.
It wasn't true in Pennsylvania.
Oh, okay. I see what
It's
you're
such
saying.
a localized thing.
Right.
That's
Right.
below the Mason-Dixon line.
Right.
But then you had to go back to how was slavery started. Slavery was started by blacks selling blacks to whites, and they brought them over on boats.
Right.
And the Deep South believed that they were treated better here than they were where they came from. While they were still, they worked in cotton fields and things, but they never were free, and that's what we were supposed to be, free.
Right.
So that was a bone of contention. Not as much today anymore because we have more Northerners living in Atlanta today than there are people from the South.
Yeah.
So that's what the service did. World War II, camps all over the country, Louisiana, California, Arkansas, and a guy from Philadelphia could end up in California. And sometimes they met gals in those towns, married, stayed there. So it made a big difference.
Did you have any papers or anything that?
Well, I gave them, I just get my discharges and things like that. I just keep them in a folder.
Mm-hmm. Any pictures of?
I gave them the pictures, which they returned. We had a military wedding. The best man was a Marine, and the bridesmaid was a wave.
Is this you?
That's me in Italy.
How was that? Tripped up.
Now that was another thing. We camped in an olive grove in Italy, and they called a big meeting. We had a general and all the top brass. I'll give you the point of it all. And it was raining like crazy. And we were in a big tent like you see in a circus,
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Frankfurt?
And one of the generals got up and said, "We want to tell you what's happening here." This was the first week in May. That's my brother-in-law.
This one right here?
Yeah, the one.
I was gonna say it looked different from you.
That one, the Bonaventure.
This is
Got
the
killed.
one that died?
Yeah.
He died, what year was that?
1942.
1942. You said you got married a little bit before then?
Is it 42? Yeah, we got married in 44. So he must have, no, he was a class of 42 at Bonaventure, and he died 44. That's what, that 42 was wrong. 44. 2 days later, after, yeah. So this was a big meeting. We're in there, and knowing that our troops were moving up because we had the prisoners. Well, the general said, here's what we figured. It looks like the Germans are holed up in the Alps in the hills, and it looks like they're dug in, and we could be here for another year to two. Not only is it raining, it's bad news to have somebody tell you that.
Right.
And all of a sudden, there's a lot of gunfire going off, and a guy comes running into the tent within 10 minutes after that speech, and he said, "The Germans have surrendered in Italy."
Wow.
What that points up is, use that for life too. You can get knocked around all through your life, and the next morning you wake up, something else happens, and all that you thought was wrong is right.
Yeah. That's funny.
That was so ironic.
How long since the Germans surrendered? How long were you there?
They surrendered the first week in May, and I was there until the middle of August.
Middle of August.
Yeah,
So you guys did have a few more months.
Yeah, we shipped.
prison.
Yeah, but we didn't have to go up in the hills to dig them out either. There
Right.
weren't any troops
Right.
up there. But I used to watch the airplanes go, because they didn't bomb, like I said, Rome. But if there was on the train tracks, there'd be a place where one guy would stand in Italy. He'd switch the tracks, all the way up through Italy. Every one of those buildings was destroyed by the Air Corps.
Wow.
Everything that wasn't, they stayed away from Florence. They didn't bomb Florence. But when you look up, you watch 16 go up in formation, and then you come back and see 10 come back.
Really?
And you say, well, they were shot down, or had to go down.
Was that usually the case that they were
Well,
shot down?
it was more so when they had to go up over the Po River. But sometimes they'd come back one missing or two, But and then we went down. We were being shipped back. Some went directly to the Pacific. So just the way the dice fall, it goes back to where the guy announces the war is over. And some went down through the Suez Canal and immediately was in the Orient. So they went from one battlefield to another. We were routed back through the States for a 30-day leave. And they offered to fly us back. And we said, no, we're in a hurry to get home, but we don't think we'll fly back. And the plane that we were on went down in the Pacific. We were supposed to be on.
Really?
So
Wow.
So when we got back, and my daughter Patty made this note for me to tell, because she always enjoyed it. When you did serve your family, my mother and father and sister, they would put a star in the window. It's a flag with a star on it. And my mother had 2 stars in the window, one for my wife and one for me. So we came home and got home for a leave in September. And some of the boys I served with were home. So when is your mother going to take that flag out? You've been home 30 days. I said, that flag is from my wife. She's still serving.
Wow. So they never knew that your wife was serving, or?
They didn't put it together,
Yeah.
They thought that just was one flag. When I got there, she took that flag.
Okay, I
But
see
she
what
left it
you're
there.
Right.
But so Patty always enjoyed that story. I said, yes, I got a wife serving. And I guess you notice I have an accent, which is a New York City accent. And I served overseas with a Jewish fella that was a lieutenant from Boston, Massachusetts, who they have accents, but they feel that they speak the King's English. Boston does.
Right.
They came over on the Mayflower.
Right.
So we
think
came
they're-
over on potato boats. But so he drove me nuts with the accent. You know, God, he said, when you go back home, you better start going to school and learn how to speak the English language. I said, yeah, okay. So we landed in Boston, to my great happiness. We were one of the first troop ships back, and they were people waving from the windows, and they had a complex like a PX, and we went in to make phone calls. My phone call was to my wife in Texas. So there's a line of operators there, and he's standing right next to me. And he had a call outside of Stockton, Massachusetts. And the girl says to me, gosh, she said, you must be so happy to be home in Boston. I grabbed him by his collar and I said, now repeat that.
Oh, that's fun.
So it was, you know, some of the lighter moments,
Yeah.
but he really aggravated.
What was one of the things while you were stationed in Italy? What angered you the most? Like, did you ever have a feeling of anger or something, or towards someone, or usually it's pretty calm? Or
Yeah, not too, you know, you weren't against the people that, you know, they were invaded, you know, Japan invaded. Their leader took them to that. I don't think he had much of a choice because the Germans just came down. They went from country to country.
yeah, like their mom.
Yeah, they were Austria, you know, went through all of Czechoslovakia.
That's great.
So they kind of, not too much. I never had a hang up on it.
Did anyone you knew ever had, anger towards someone, or were they mad at something, or anything?
Yeah, there was a lot. I had a lot of them from the Pacific had an anger against. I served a lot of them. They came back and helped train troops, and I was part of the training. And not only do we have used up too much.
I don't know where we
They served in the Pacific, where it was an island to island type of a war there, you know, little Iwo Jima, and the Japanese were soldiers that would never give up, and they had to go into those caves and dig them out, sometimes burn them out. It wasn't a good way to fight a war, but that's what they had to do. But also, they were in little places where, if, like Bataan Death March, they were all mad about that. You know, people that served there, that would get you. Other than that, they'd come home and go. I had a fellow who was only about 5'7", maybe 6. I didn't know how he got in because you had to be a certain height. He was an old-time veteran, and he went nuts one day. He came in, and he says, I just got a message from Chicago. He said they lost a dining car from California. He was on a troop train that came from California to Chicago. And he said they're going to charge me for a dining car because they can't find the car. I said, for God's sake, there's no way they would do that. I said, so about 3 months later, they found the car back in California. So they took the bill off his record.
Jeez.
Something else. And then, too, I was called back for, I mentioned, didn't keep this organized. In Korea, I was in the inactive reserve with my commission, but I wouldn't go to any active. They had an active thing right in downtown Buffalo that would meet once a week, and they were paying $10 an hour, say 3 hours a night. And I wouldn't go to that except money because I didn't want. I figured they'll call them first. So when they called up any reserve, they left them and called up the inactive reserve, which again is a typical Army procedure. And so then I was scheduled to go 10 days before, 15 days before Christmas. The guy I went with, the guy I had 3 children. And I was, I think then I was about 28, 29, 30 maybe. And the guy who went with me, he served in Europe. He was a bachelor. They said he's got to come January 15th. So he said to me, "Gee," he said, "you got a family. I'll take your place and you take my place." The Army don't do that. He wanted me to be home for Christmas. Well, 5 days before, I got a telegram saying you're back in the inactive reserve because you have 4 dependents. Now that's how much different this war is than that. Those are a family from Colorado, husband and wife, both in the military, full-time military, not just, they're making a career out of it. Had 4 children, and the 4 children were going to be watched by their sister in Rochester.
Wow.
So they were taken, but that's their career.
Right. So that's...
Which wasn't my career, but...
Right, that was their choice to do that, you're saying.
But I did get, when I was training troops in Fort Landing, Florida, that's near Jacksonville, we had, like I said, we had 200 or 300, but I was watching a fellow that didn't seem to look like he was too old to be called up. He was drafted, too old to be called up, so I went to see him in his barracks. He said to him, "How old are you?" He said, "Oh, I'm 33 years old." I said, are you married? He said, "Yeah." He said, "I have 5 kids." I said, he used to work in a booth in the New York subway and pass out change. Somebody put a quarter down and you give him 5 nickels. You could ride the subway for a nickel. It's $1.50 today.
Wow.
But the wages were $1.25 now.
Right.
So they got down to him, and apparently he had, in his district, he had to go. So I went to the major and I said, "Here's a guy that he can't take the physical 20-mile marches over these hills and dales, and he's got 5 kids." And so we worked through the personnel and got him sent home.
Really?
So my 4, when they stopped me from going to Korea, I got paid back.
Right.
So that's how life is.
Yeah, that's neat. Nice for that guy, too.
We got about 5 minutes left,
Okay.
so if we can just
Have to keep shooting.
keep that in mind.
See what my daughter wrote down. Oh, she wrote down vets benefits, which they gave bonuses, and a lot of them went back to college. A lot of us did. But most of it did that because starting at Henry Kelly's, I was getting $28 a week, but my rent was $28 a month. And so by taking courses, I got $50 a week, which gave you a little bit
More change.
income. And we did I wanted to go to Cornell, but my father-in-law was driving me up and the car broke down and we turned around, went back, and he ended up going to UP. Because I wanted to be a food inspector. Because I went to agricultural college and I wanted to be a food inspector. It turned out.
Just happened to be that way.
So I didn't sign up at Cornell. Today it's one of the most expensive schools and one of the toughest schools to get in.
Yeah.
Tough to get in there.
Anything else you had to say for us, or anything marked down?
Just getting more questions.
I was gonna ask you before, what was, when you were stationed in Italy, what was the happiest moment that you experienced there? What was one of the greatest moments? I mean, was it when you heard that the Germans surrendered? Was that one of them? Or?
Well, yeah, that was good, and then meeting people that you went to school with, 2 or 3 of them from those letters helped a lot.
Right.
And when we did have our leave Naples was a tough town. They used to say, if you see somebody going up the street with a violin case, open it up. It may not have a violin in it. But if you're in Milan or Florence and you see a kid going down the street with a violin case, he's got a violin.
Really?
It was just a different culture, you know. But we went to a nightclub which was on a roof when we were in Rome. And all the soldiers from all over. Italy had South African troops, Australian troops, Canadian troops, British troops, along with the American. And we had a big table, a bunch of GIs sitting around, and had an entertainment up on the stage. And guys from our group went up and took over the microphone, pushed the guys, sat all the entertainers down. They went into singing Frank Sinatra songs and the whole bit. And the British troops would come over, Canadians and British would come over. You Yanks know how to have a good time. That was it.
That's funny.
That should end it, huh?
Yep. Thank you very much.
Oh, I enjoyed it. I talked too much, my wife told me.
Oh no, that was great.
Yeah, we enjoyed it.
Great job. Interesting stories.
Well, you know. But, have you got any more left?
Yep. Yeah, we got about 3 minutes.
Well, I'm going to tell you, in spite of all this, or in spite of anything that anybody else says, I'm not insulting him, and I'm not insulting myself. The real heroes never came back. Those were the heroes.
Yeah.
And they braved all over France and all over Italy with the White Crosses. My mother and father-in-law brought their son back and had him buried in Allegheny, right outside of Bonaventure College.
Yeah.
But no matter what said and all the stories, those are the heroes.